let's continue with laptop computer teardowns. First, we'll answer some questions that I had from the last video. On the HP computer, the modem had two wires going to it from the phone line. One was the phone line connection on the computer itself, but then in parallel with that was another connection going down to the main board. I've worked out why it's doing that. So quite a lot of separation is needed between the phone line and the rest of the computer. So the modem there is quite sleeved, and these wires going to the phone connection are double insulated with extra heat shrink over them. So why would they join another one in parallel and bring it down onto the main board? It's because it goes onto the docking connector, and you can see there's a split in the ground plane there, so the phone line signal is fairly well separated from the rest of the computer, and it goes through a via there, and it solders onto this pin all by itself, and then the other connection comes on the other side. Yep, so those two pins separated by themselves are the phone line connection, and those go through to here. I think we can have a look inside the docking station. This is a board from one of these docks, and if we look, the modem or phone line connection on there has got its own double insulated cable there, which goes across the bottom and then back up and then onto connector, and then across some tracks that are separated from everything else, and to those two end pins. So yes, that's why there's two in parallel. So that means that when you have the computer docked like that, you actually have a pass through from the phone line socket here to the phone line socket on the computer. They're just directly wired in parallel. I guess that doesn't normally matter because you don't have a phone line connected into both at the same time. Whereas other signals like the Ethernet will be going through, I don't know exactly where the tracks go, I think they're on internal layers, go through, and there's switching chips to direct the signals to the dock or direct them to the connector on the main board. So that answers the question. Next, we were looking at how there are holes in the Apple keyboard that if you spill your drink on here or anything on there, it's going to come through and go straight into the main board and wreck it. But on the HP keyboard, it's fully covered with a plastic, which means a liquid won't get through there. I mentioned that Lenovo have done quite a bit of work to prevent spilling from wrecking the computers, and here is one, a Lenovo computer, some bits of an X220 and X230 that I rummaged together to demonstrate this. So on the bottom of the computer there are two slots there that show keyboard dripping, and what that is a duct which goes through to the keyboard, which would allow liquid to drain through without it getting into the electronics. So this is a prototype thing that I was working on to increase the screen resolution of these computers, because they come with a very low resolution screen. So I worked to build in a much higher resolution screen and dealing with all those connections. At the moment this one just works on a display port, but I was working on connecting that into the main board. So it has an extension because this screen that's in here now is 2560 by 1700. It's a Chromebook Pixel screen, so it's quite a bit taller than the normal screen. So there's a 3D printed add-on which brings it up, and then there's this little notch here where the Think light goes to shine onto the keyboard, and then to make that work there's an extension to the palm rest which has a notch there which you use for opening the computer by this, and that works quite nice. I just didn't finish the electronics which wired the display port into it connected into one of the display port lines that goes to the dock, and yeah, that's exciting. So these keyboards here, you're allowed to spill stuff onto them, and when you do, it won't come through. Those slots there are sealed from the other side. It's all sealed off, and liquids would come down to the bottom edge there where there's little cracks, and then there's channels in this frame which all go through to those slots that we saw on the other side. So normally the main board has been all peeled off, but it will have plastic stuff taped all over it so any liquid cannot get into it. And the way that sits in this frame, anything that spills on the keyboard, you can tip it and it will drain out through the slots and out the bottom without affecting anything. So you can see how those ducts work there. These holes, and then it's sealed up, and then there's the drain, and similarly on the other side there's the slot which is ducted across this channel onto there, which then lines up with the slots in the base, so it will drain through without messing up the computer. Really clever, well thought out design. So there's slots in the main board. This is an X220 main board, so it's a bit different to the X230, which is what I was working with. But it's the same thing, because quite a bit of the components are reused. They just changed it a bit. They put mini DisplayPort instead of the full-sized. So what I was doing, the dock connector there has got two DisplayPorts going to it, which you can see the coupling capacitors, and I overtook one of those lines and redirected it into that new screen so that you could get high resolution. Much nicer, because the original display was 720, which is just unusable. Can't do any real work with that. So then I just bought another computer which has that resolution screen anyway, which is very rare. 2560, except it was 41440, which is good enough. Not as good as the 1700 high or 1600 high, but workable. So that's a good way of not wrecking your computer by spilling things on it, is get a good Lenovo computer. Though I don't know if their current models are as good as that. Probably not. Now let's take apart the batteries from the computers we took apart. Now the Apple one has screws, really tiny screws, bigger than that. So that was T2. Maybe it's T4. Yes, T4 size. There's a whole row of screws down both sides. Let's take these off and have a look inside it. This battery is completely dead, so it needs to go to recycling anyway. A couple of the other batteries I had charged, but this one not interested. And some of the batteries I got were completely puffed up. Okay, yeah, it doesn't do anything when you plug it in. It's coming off one side. Oh, it's glued as well. 2008 there, I think. Yeah, so it's pouches. So this plastic part on the outside is just taped onto a aluminium the testing thing with the LEDs. Okay, it's just a little button. There must be a little circuit board there that deals with the indicating the battery level, and that foot's probably just stuck on there. Lots of tape. I don't think we can get out these cells, probably not worth it. So there's a pretty thick flex PCB there, and maybe thermal fuses for each cell, and there's also thermistors or NTCs for temperature measurement, so it can shut down the charging if it gets too hot. Yeah, I think it would be wise to try and rip these out, although they're probably completely discharged, so it's pretty inert at the moment. Oh yeah, we can get that plastic piece off. Ah, so there's a board. Two boards in there. Managed charging, I guess. Protection. It's interesting, they've attached this quite thick flex contacts through the slots in the board. Perhaps we should measure it, see if there's any charge on there. 4.1. Wonder if they're all joined in series. If they have, then that's very flat. Guess we should be careful with it then, since it's still got some charge. Oh no, it's stuck itself down. there a way we can work out easily if it's series or parallel? Maybe they got around a balancing issue by putting all the cells in parallel. There would be balancing wires if they were in series. I don't see any, so maybe they are all in parallel. In which case there's a reasonable amount of voltage on it. You can see the tabs of the batteries. So that one measures 2. These other ones measure nothing. So it must be series or damaged in some way. Alright, that's an Apple battery. Let's see if we can get into this HP battery. It's going to be quite tricky to open since they don't put convenient screws on that and it'll be all glued together. So it could get dodgy. Started off with creating a little opening. There we go. And there'll be a board in there which we shouldn't be too mean to. Okay, it's opening up fairly easily. There we go. Opened. 6 cells, 18650 style or size, and they're in parallel groups of 2, so it's a 3 series string, and each section gets wired onto this board so it can monitor the balance. Now we broke a little component off of it there in the process of prying it apart. Let's measure this to see if there's any charge on it. I suspect it will have close to nothing. Might be conformal coated on the board. Does not appear to have anything. Yeah, I think it's flat. Completely flat. 37 millivolts. Wow. Okay, so that's a flat battery. These can go in the battery recycling bin. So there's a thermistor on that as well, so it can measure the temperature and stop the charging if it overheats. Under these stickers could be a Coulomb counter type thing, so it can accurately monitor how much charge is going in and out of it. Unfortunately doesn't account for self-discharge, so they can go out. The counts can get out of it if you leave it sitting around for a long time and don't use it, because it probably thinks it's charged now, but it's been sitting around for so long and it's worn out that it's just self-discharged. Another interesting thing, we were looking at the heat sinks from the computers, the Apple one and the HP one. The HP one, they bring the heat pipe more into the center so it can radiate in both directions where the fan's blowing through. The Apple one, it's just along one surface of the heatsink, so it can only radiate in one direction. It's quite a bit smaller. Yeah, the fan will have to run more. So it's got some thermistor type things there for measuring the temperature, and I noticed it has 2 of them. There's this one here which is on the heat pipe, and this one here which is on the fins of the heatsink. So I assume what that means is that it can predict that heat is coming because it can be sensed in the heat pipe before it actually reaches up to the fins of the heatsink. So it means it can probably spin up the fan a little bit in anticipation of needing to cool something down very shortly. So that's quite cunning. The HP one didn't have any of that stuff, although it might have done it in a different way. It might have some other predictable thing based on CPU temperatures. Got another Apple computer. This one's a bit more ugly and rounded compared to the other ones. They made a bad choice there. The other ones were quite smart, but this is like a kid's toy type style. It almost works, but the screen is broken. So yeah, you can't see anything. It does boot up. I plugged an external screen in. This is the slightly newer version that's got a mini DisplayPort, and I connected a screen to it, and you can see the background image on there, but I don't know if you can make this the primary. Yeah, this bottom part is peeling off a bit. So what I was wondering is, can we put one of the display panels from those older Apple computers that we were looking at in the previous video into this one to get it working? should take it apart and have a look, because this is a slightly better CPU than the other ones, I think. Either that or it's got discrete graphics. I don't know how to turn it off now. It's on at the moment. And it looks like the battery works because, yeah, it's lit up. So let's take it apart. I don't know if someone else has had a go in this one already because it was missing some screws. This is different to open than the others. It's just a panel on the bottom. Seems like that rubbery stuff's peeling off. It's attached just by it hooking over that lip by the look of it. So it might be possible to get it back on, but not very easy because you just pull it off somewhere else by your fingers. Yeah, anyway. So this one has a fixed built-in battery and also the hard disk, which I didn't screw back properly. I did look in here earlier. Oh, it has some little screws that poke into holes. So the screen connector over here, I had a look at that, and it's different to the one from the other Apple computers, which was this dual row. Is that or single row plug-in type thing, whereas this computer, it's got this thing with a little release handle on it that you can pull on to unplug it. So that's completely different, but I was wondering if maybe the panel end uses the same connector as this, and which means we could put the panel in and just leave this cable as is since it's different. But we're going to have to take the screen apart to determine that, and I don't know how to do that. We might need to take this drive out so it doesn't end up getting damaged. It's got a delicate cable there. So the drive is retained by this clip, this bracket thing, and then some special shaped screws which have a head that protrudes to go into these and into little holes on the other side. Strange system. Just get this cable out of the way. So the SATA cable's got its own little special little plug there and its own retention. It's probably has it grounding? Maybe, not sure. Should we take the battery out while we're at it? It says do not remove the battery. I wonder what happens if you remove it. It's even got a pull tab on it. Oh, it's got three-way type screw heads for the battery. I assume that's the power coming out of the battery, and maybe that's a control signal or something to the battery, like all the balancing. We'll leave that as is for now. I'll put back this display connector since we're hoping we can connect it from the other end, disconnect it from the other end. It's only going to work if it's compatible with the panel, which who knows. So how do we open this? Probably another one that's very tricky, clipped together. Wonder if we can get it off. Would that be easier if we took off the panel so we could work on it separately? I'm just making this up as I go along. This looks like something that needs to be removed, and then there's a bunch of Torx screws there, which are probably holding the hinges together. That didn't fit the screwdriver very well. Strange, it's a shallow. Maybe that is actually a Phillips rather than a JIS. There's a small Phillips here. It does seem to fit well. Okay, maybe it's Phillips then, not JIS. Phillips are a little bit blunter. Anyway, so that's taken out a grill thing. I wonder if this has speakers back here like the other computer did. It does have something interesting. This cable going across. I wonder if that's data for the drive? Could be. What that is. Maybe that's a temperature sensor. Looks like it. There might be a thermistor thing on the side of the heatsink with a wire going back to there. Looks like we're doing a full teardown of this thing. I wonder if that would lift. Probably have to take this off as well. Oh, I see. That's the Wi-Fi in there. Ah, and that must be a speaker wire, not a thermistor. Yep, that's a speaker on the other side of that. So that's the aerials. I wonder if it's Bluetooth as well. Be a reason to have three. There's a post on the backside of this which is damaged, so you can see the back of it there in cracked plastic. I guess it's not supposed to come off. It's supposed to all come up with the drive. Oh, okay, the data for the drive is that thing. Now what? Oh, there's another screw there. There's probably one down the other side too that I can't see. Yeah, in there. Ah, and another screw for the battery is covered by that little thing that says don't remove the battery. Okay, so there's normally a screw coming through from inside the CD drive holding this plastic clip-on, which has the Wi-Fi stuff and the speaker there. Interesting. So there's a little duct there for the speaker, the noise from the speaker to go out. Interesting. So I wonder if that's a PCIe signal there. Probably is. PCIe 1 times, which probably got USB as well as. So the only way to get that off would be to take apart the DVD drive and unscrew the screw that's holding that on. Is that true? Ah, no, it's not true. What it has is a little channel down here. There's a channel down there to get to the screw that holds it to the drive. Okay, that makes it a bit more reasonable. And then there's 2 screws holding the actual Wi-Fi bits in. Is that another speaker? I think it will be Bluetooth on this one here with its aerial, and Wi-Fi on this one with the dual aerial, and probably PCIe one-time connection to that, a USB connection to that. That's what I reckon. So I think that's why there's that many data pairs in this cable here. It'll be PCIe clock, transmit, receive for 3 pairs, and then another pair for the USB data, and then there'll be some powers and grounds. That's what I reckon. Okay, we're taking the screen off. Okay, so covered by this bracket was another screw which lines up with that. And now we're going to take this thing off again, which I just put back. And that might be all of the connections to the screen. The Wi-Fi wires are there. Little screws. Now this might come off. So the hinges are in the wrong position, aren't they? Ah, that's annoying. There we go, so the screen is liberated from the computer, and we can see on the other side of the motherboard, there's system board, there's heaps of dust in there, reminiscent of the other computer. Now how do we get this apart? I have to poke around at this thing for a while and see what happens. So this base bit kind of peels open. Not sure what's actually holding that together. There's a screw in there. Maybe we should take those screws out. The screws down there, which you can just see. Who knows if that's the right way of doing it. Oh yeah, it looks like it's supposed to do this, because it's a hinge type mechanism. Kind of rubbery thing around the edge. Well, at least we're not going to wreck it by because the screen's already broken, so it's not going to get worse, is it? It looks like it's just taped down. Wow, that's pretty bad, isn't it? Good unmaintainable stuff, just tape it together. Wow, there's no clips, it's just taped. So I guess we didn't have to open this thing. It doesn't want to close now. That's just making it harder to get this taped on stuff off. Okay, well there's also a chance that this is going to be an EDP screen because the computer has DisplayPort on it, so perhaps the panel will be DisplayPort as well. Looks like there are 4 screws there to take the panel out. And the GIS fits a bit better in those ones. Oh, that thing's come off finally. Oh, it had, so it wasn't a hinge. This thing didn't have a hinge, it was just that it was getting ripped off its screw hole. So the order to take it apart is to peel this thing off, this frame thing off first. Then you can access the screws to take this bottom bit off. Anyway, we screwed that up. Yeah, this panel is quite different. The power connection for it is there, or the data connection, which is the connector there. Has some tape on it, which I've been trying to peel up so I can unplug it. Can't just slide the cable out because it tees off another thinner cable which goes up probably for a microphone. And the tape is disintegrating. Wow, that's really difficult to remove. Okay, so I might have damaged the connector there because of that tape not releasing when I was pulling on it. Can we get it? So it's unplugged, but I think I ripped the top off of the connector at the same time as trying to get that tape off. But so we've confirmed that it's not a compatible interface, so we won't be able to use one of the panels out of the older Apple computers. That's a shame. That is not the same as this, which is what I was hoping it would be. I was hoping we could get them to connect, but unfortunately it isn't. And unfortunately this is wrecked now because the top of the connector ripped off when I was pulling on the tape. So it's tangled the little latching clip with the top of the connector and the tape. Probably hasn't broken anything, but yeah. So the other wire goes to the webcam. So the webcam in this one, it looks like it's all on one board this time rather than separated into a separate flex board with the image sensor on it. It's 4 pins, so it's probably just one USB. Interesting. Yeah, shame that screen's broken, but if it wasn't broken it probably wouldn't have been given to me, so there you go. AU Optoelectronics. That's the part number of this screen. Perhaps I should look it up and see what type it is. I found a datasheet for the display, so we can take a look at that. 1280 by 800 resolution, LVDS interface. Okay, so it probably is possible to join one of the older Apple computer screens onto this cable, but we'd have to peel it apart and strip out the wires and then twist them together and solder them. So this one has either got an LED driver built into it, or you have to provide LED drive signals. Wonder if we can determine that. Well, the datasheet should tell us. So these VCCs, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And look at that, LED cathodes, LED anode. So there's no LED driver built into this. So none of that matters because the other screen that we're putting in is one that has a cold cathode driver, which you just need to work out the pin out of that to power it up. So there's no LED driver on this. That means the LED driver for the display must be on the system board. Perhaps we should take a look at it. Display connector in the corner. Let's take this board out and poke around with it. Maybe we should take the battery out after all, because it says that we shouldn't. I might have some screws, maybe screwdrivers for that. Kind of three-way thing. They've got triangles. A Y2.6. So maybe that will do it. Good, isn't it? We're not allowed to look at this. It's being censored for your protection. Anyway, so that does fit. The battery screws are not done up very tight, or at all. I wonder what happens if you take the battery out. It's probably glued down. I wonder how that comes out. There's probably screws on the other side. Don't know, there are screws on this edge. I don't know what they do. I suppose they could be for the battery. Yeah, they were for the battery. So it's got a kind of vertical header thing. Quite strange. Seems like today we're not allowed to look at things, isn't it? Interesting connector that pushes down into pins on the board. So that other wire there was going off to the touchpad, and I assume the keyboard as well. Similar to the other computer. The keyboard controller seemed to be part of the touchpad. So I suppose that's another speaker there? Weird place for it. If the other one was there. Or maybe that's the sub. And there's another speaker over here, perhaps. See if the fan comes out. It's 3 screws of different lengths. Look at that, like before there was dust stuck all over it. Not quite as bad as that other one though. What does that other wire go to? Probably that light that's on the corner there. What is that then? Oh, maybe the keyboard is separate in this one and has its own connector there. Ribbon cable connector. Okay, we've got a smaller Torx now. That was T8. We've got to go down to something smaller. I think this computer only has a small amount of RAM. I looked at those. 2 1 gig modules, so 2 gigs of RAM. So a bit poor by today's standards, but I think this is a different type of RAM to the other one. The other Apple computer had this RAM, this green one, and you see it's a different connector. The notches in a different place, so this must be DDR3 maybe? I don't know what the types are that they use. This one has at least more normal RAM connectors. There's more things to disconnect there. I wonder what those go to. Pretty sure this has a very similar Core 2 processor to the other computer. Its main board is made quite differently though. Something else. Oh, the power in plug is on the bottom. Oh, look at that. The heat pipe thing is quite different. It's more stylish. Okay, so there is another speaker under there. And the other wire was going to little tracks in there for the wires to go in. The other wire was going to something in the power connector. I wonder why that needed a separate wire when the power connector is right there. Why would they have another wire? So we should pull it out and look at it. Oh, it's a microphone. I see, so that's not related to the power connector. The power connector. Very dirty, like the other one was. Again, has some little common mode choke thing on there. And some glue pad on the bottom. Yeah, let's just brush the dust off this. Main board investigation. Again, they've got the split magnetics for the Ethernet, but this time they didn't put tape over it, that ripped it off. There's a Realtek chip. Oh, there's no firewire on this one. That's disappointing. How can we use the awesome webcams? These good things, which have this nice canister to keep them safe. Whoa. Keep it safe in that box. Yeah, so you can't use that on this because there's no firewire port. Disappointing. What are these? Are they fancy FETs? Or diodes? Capacitors? Don't know, I haven't seen a package like that before. It's very interesting. The bottom side of the board has got these spring-loaded probe-like things in many locations. It looks like those are for joining ground onto the back panel, or the bottom panel of the computer, for shielding. So there's the display connector, so presumably somewhere near that is going to be an LED driver, and the power input right there as well, so it might be difficult to distinguish it from the other parts. It'll be a 6-channel LED driver. I don't know, could be that, could be that. There's inductors around, various inductors, but this stuff here looks like the power supply for the CPU. And there's all sorts of more power supply stuff over here, but that will be related to the battery connection right there. Yeah, that could be that thing that does the LED backlight. Yeah, so that will be all battery charging and regulating stuff. Looks like they've got fancy capacitors with that purple writing. It reminds me of OSCON capacitors. Maybe that's what they are, surface mount versions. It's interesting, all the ports on this computer are stood up off the main board, whereas the other one had connectors that all went partway through most of them went partway through the board to get it nice and slim, whereas this is different. There's a small thing there which is interesting. It looks like something plugged into a header. We can pull that off. Not easily. Doesn't seem to want to come off. Maybe I've wrecked it now, it's wobbly. It looked like something that's plugged into a little pin header, but I think I just ripped it off. Maybe it's been glued in. It looks like some kind of option or ROM type thing that can be removed. Very bizarre. Don't know what that is. Alright, that's interesting. Yeah, that's the main board from the other one. Similar sort of layout. The connectors down the side, CPU, RAM positions. Yeah, it's more integrated, it doesn't have this thing. Must all be taken care of in the other chip, be a much newer chipset in it. And it also has more normal RAM connections without these weird lever thingies. Must save a lot of cost not needing those weird things. And a lot of board real estate since they've stacked them. Might try looking up some of these chips just for fun. I found the LED driver for the LCD panel. It's this little thingy here, which is a NXP MC34845. Low cost 6-channel LED backlight driver with integrated power supply. And you can see the example on how to wire it up there. So it's a boost converter, which provides current out there, and then it has 6 sinks, and there'll be some sort of op-ampy things in them so it can sense current and provide slight voltage biases on these pins to balance the currents out amongst the LEDs. So it's got a little inductor, so it's probably that. Guess that's close to it. That thing there is I think a 2-phase switch mode thing, so that's doing some other power supply. I think that's what it was. That's the LED driver, which needs 1 inductor and a diode. So I would say that, I don't know about that, but it's probably that, and then there's a little thing that looks like a diode next to it, and there's some caps there, probably them. And there's a switch in there, switch A and B. So those will turn on, which will bring this point to ground. Current will flow through the inductor will build up a magnetic field. The switch will turn off. The inductor will cause current to continue flowing, and the voltage will rise up high enough that it can push current through this diode and fill up this capacitor, even if the voltage on this point is higher than the input, because this will cause a voltage drop across it to force the current to flow, and the only path it will have is through that diode into here. That's a current mirror, that's what they call it. Is that the only block diagram you get? Surely there'll be a more detailed one which shows the little current sinks inside it. No, that's disappointing. They usually well, in one that I've seen before, they give you a better view of how these little things work. It's got a small resistor in series with each one of these and a little op-amp thing monitoring the voltage across it so that it can bring each one of these to ground or slightly above ground to reduce the current flowing in it, and then that keeps them all balanced to account for small voltage differences in the LED strings. There you go, backlight drivers. Maybe that's enough on this Apple computer. It's been very interesting. Let's do another thing. Here's another HP computer. Let's take it apart. Was this the one we turned on yesterday? I don't think so. Pretty sure it... this one... do we need to bother turning it on? Again, it's got that small thing, but this one's intact. Probably works. I have two of this model, so I think we'll dismantle this one. This is good because it's got the little track point thing, so you can actually use it without needing an external mouse. These things make it a lot easier to precisely control the pointer than this thing where you're constantly swiping around. Yeah, so it's good to see this. It's also good to see this on the high-end HPs and Lenovo computers that are available today. Good. Make sure you always get a computer with one of these. Otherwise you'll be disappointed. I think we need to change to the slightly larger Torx. So there's a hard disk access similar to the other one. So we'll compare the motherboard in this system board to the one we took apart yesterday. Hard disk access. I think this one's also an IDE one. Some of the other computers I have from this range are SATA. That looks like an IDE. So this one's got a 40 gigabyte drive. Ooh, it's a bit small, isn't it, by today's standards? It has a RAM access. What is this? 512 megabytes. So it might have another one on the other side again. And interesting, this is actually pretty much exactly the same as the one from the Apple computers. So that's interesting. Again, it's got a bottom mounting battery and the regular battery here. I think that's the same as the one we just took apart, so we won't need to take that one apart. Let's have a look at a bottom mounting battery. It looks like this, does it have, that thing comes out. Is that another one of those Bluetooth modules? It is, look at that. This time you can actually see the aerial on it. Specially shaped thingy. Good. Let's have a look at the battery that would go on the bottom of this. Here it is. This is the additional battery you can get for these computers. And it's got some metal tabs there. And then this hooky thing. Two hooky things. So the metal tabs go in. And then... yeah, so it lifts up the computer a bit. And also blocks the fan pretty much completely, which is a bit sad. Probably doesn't do that on all models, but it still leaves access so you can still connect to the dock, which is nice. So that will allow your computer to run a lot longer. Yeah, so it blocks the fan completely, but it's got this little vent thing which goes out to these tiny holes, so yeah, it's not the best, but interesting. On this computer, which I got it off of, there's no fan on the bottom there, although there's that, so it doesn't get blocked as much. This is a more high-end version. It has discrete graphics and other good things like that. I think this is the one we installed Windows 2000 on in a very early video. Okay, so battery. We'll just chuck that in the recycling. Let's take it apart. Here's the other one, had a whole thing you could open up to get to the Wi-Fi card. This one doesn't have that. There's 3 things for releasing the keyboard. Maybe the Wi-Fi is under the keyboard on this one. Notice there are some Phillips screws there. Perhaps we have to take those off before the case will come apart. Let's take them off now anyway. They're very small screws. So this computer here, just one PC card, SD card, one USB there, Ethernet modem, VGA, the DC, PS2, serial port, 2 more USBs. So this is one of the lower end computers. It's only got 3 USB ports. Don't buy a computer if it's got less than 4, because otherwise you'll find you always got to use hubs and things to join up your devices. Very annoying. And I wouldn't buy one with less than 2 Thunderbolt ports either, especially if you have to use one of them for charging. Okay, so the keyboard will come out by releasing those clips. Similar to before. The track point thing got its own separate wire, which is well used. The flex cable's a bit mounted there, so that's good. I wonder if we can use that separately by joining it up to a PS2 port. It's got its own little control chip. Very interesting. We need to investigate that. It's a little thing using a couple of strain gauges to measure the force of you pushing it around, or applying force to it with your finger. Let's see. Can we get the optical drive out? Was there something we had to release for that? It was that screw there. Retains the optical drive, so that should push out now. Interesting. Is it still held by something? I don't think so. Oh, it's one of those push to eject types. So it has a little bump on it there. Okay, so you can leave that screw undone and then push to insert and remove the drive as you need. Probably because you can get removable hard disk cases that fit in this place if you want to use them instead of the optical drive. Oh no, it's the whole thing that gets removed. It's this top panel, which has, oh, this time it's a double row connector. It's quite interesting. Similar thing for the display there, but with shielding on the sides. The Wi-Fi stuff goes down here, so the Wi-Fi thing must be under the palm rest. Just makes it a bit tricky to remove. And cable routes. Now, we'll probably have to take some of these out. Size 1 screwdriver for those bigger screws there. There's all the little ones on size 0. Now there's some screws there. I think these will be the last ones holding the screen on. Okay, now we can't take the screen away because the aerial cables have been out of frame here. The aerial cables are still trapped below this palm rest. So we'll pull all this stuff up. Oh, it's all clipped on. Get the palm rest up. It's all very well clipped together down the sides here. Makes me think there's some other way of doing this. I think there is. There are screws hidden under these rubbery things. And that one there, the screw post has already been snapped off, so I wonder if that was me or someone else discovered that. And also there's an IR port there. So that's cunning, so there's little rubbery retainer things. So now, okay, so one of the aerial wires is already ripped off, and there's a cable for the touchpad. So yeah, the aerial wires are retained by this thing. That makes me wonder, does the touchpad, is it the touchpad lifts up and you can then access the Wi-Fi card under it? That's what it looks like. How would you do that though? There's no... Oh, like that. Look at that. That's cunning, isn't it? So once you've taken the keyboard out, you would pull on the touchpad and lift that up, then you can access the Wi-Fi card. And I think that's probably the same one as what we had in the other HP computer. What a cunning design, making that another access panel. I also wonder if maybe the wires from the track point, which plugged into there, go straight down and come up through here so that the buttons for it get picked up. Not sure, they're really nice feeling buttons on these. They've done a good thing at implementing those. So this panel is all nicely shielded. and strengthened by these aluminium struts, whatever they are, magnesium alloy type stuff, which provides shielding and rigidity. There's another metal bit that's heat staked on there. There's also, that comes off, but it's not supposed to come off because, that's not a thing you peel off when you buy it, I don't think. Anyway, main board. Look at that thing there. Maybe it's South Bridge or some other thing. Yeah, looks like that's the South Bridge thing. So again, they've got the same assembly with these plugs on the side and cable assembly going over. I wonder if it's a compatible one. I'll keep the screen out of the way. So the battery is, CMOS battery is squeezed in the side there, and RS-232 as well. But this time it doesn't look like it's retained through a metal part. It's just slotted in there. Retained by something. Yeah, the power connector is soldered onto the system board. So that's a disadvantage in these computers, that when you break it, like what we saw on the other computer, it's wrecked. You have to replace the system board or get out your soldering iron and try and desolder that quite difficult to desolder connector. Whereas on the Apple computer, the connector was on a separate board, or its own separate assembly that could be replaced independently. That seems to be the case with Lenovo as well. The power connectors are on separate little cable assemblies, but not all models. The fan was not screwed down very tightly. Retained screws is nice. Whoa, look what we found in there. A whole mattress worth of fluff. Wow. So that would have been struggling a lot. Sucked up a lot of bad stuff over the years. Yeah, it's nice they retain the screws with little washers so that it doesn't fall out. So I've thought about people servicing the fan. Again, here's a modem connector. Goes over to little modem module, which again has two connectors, although they parallel them at the PCB end this time, not at the modem end. Interesting. Same sort of thing. Probably the same part as what we saw in the other computer. RAM, more RAM. What's this? Another 512 megabytes. So that computer had a gigabyte total. Some kind of rubber thing there to squish something in. What else do we need to undo to get this board out? And there's little metal clips holding wires in place. So that goes to the serial port. It's a little metal frame. There you go, that's come out. It's got a little connector at that end as well, and some resistors, RS-232, and the battery is then wedged in there, and its own little heat shrink sleeve plugged in for easy removal. The VGA plug has got thumb screws going into the metal frame. We'll need to undo those. Can we do it the right way? There's enough room around that one to get access to it. Board should come out now. Comes out from this end. Speaker assembly. Two speakers in a chamber. So it uncovers that end. There's tape stuff holding these cables down. That unplugs. Board comes out. There's this I/O stuff down here. So it's different to the other one because this one has only one connector at this end. And there's a little chip on there. I'm pretty sure the other one had two connectors at both ends. It has two connectors at the main board end. So there's a microphone there. Yeah, look at that. So the computer's microphone is on the side, listening carefully to what you say. There's orange capacitors. A little bit of tape. Oh, it's stuck onto a capacitor. Probably the same heatsink and heat pipe assembly as the other computer. Yeah, it looks the same. Appears to have the same part number. A different manufacturer name, JCI Fujikara. That Northbridge heatsink is different. The other one had fins on it. I don't know what way it went. The mounting pattern's different on this one as well. Let's take off the CPU one. So again, it's a socketed CPU. It should be undoing each side gradually so that it's even force across the chip. Would be the proper way to do it. Otherwise you could risk cracking the die. These are retained screws. Got little E-clips, C-clips, E-clips I think those are. More crust in there. Needs a good blow job to get that out. So there's the CPU. Let's bring in the other board. So how similar are these? More or less the same size, but there's a different port layout. Things like RAM and CPU are in the same place, but this Northbridge chip is different place. This Southbridge chip is different. You wonder if it's the same one that's on. Yeah, it is. NH828, which is the same as the one from the Apple board. So that's interesting. Whereas the other HP, it's got FW828. So the same number, but the name starts different. Don't know what that means. So we take off the PC card connector, full of all these bits of tape and shielding so we can see what's going on under them. It's around the battery, extra battery connector. To the PC card slots. Oh, it's got a smart card slot under it. Look at that. Did the other one have that? Probably not, because it was 2 PC cards. Yeah, so there's a separate row. There's some extra pins there, just a small row, which go to a smart card reader. So you can use that for logging in and security on the computer. That's interesting. That's probably the same chip under there for dealing with the card slots. That Ultra Media. No, they're different ones. And there's a SD card slot. Power supply for the CPU. Nice fits there. Inductors and capacitors, all good quality stuff. The analog devices chip there. Those orange capacitors, it's probably to do with the sound card. There's an interesting thing. Something screwed down with a version number on it. Some kind of memory thing? Infineon. I don't know what that is. Some kind of memory chip? Is that a TPM? Maybe. Since it's got the smart card reader, maybe it's some other security thing that's optional. It's got a worse CPU than the other one has. Oh no, it's worse than the Apple one, that's what it's... Yeah, these are pretty much the same. Or very similar. 1.73 gigahertz, 2 megabytes, 1.6, 2 megabytes. Whereas the Apple one was 2.13 megabytes. I think it's because that's Core 2 and these are Centrino. So yeah, some other type. So for Ethernet, there was Broadcom there and these magnetics. The Ethernet socket's here, so I think that's the Broadcom chip, but it's got a pad stuck onto it. So there's the magnetics. Maybe I was a bit wrong about that being magnetics for the dock. It might just be the same as what the Apple computer had, where it shared the magnetics across 2 transformer modules, whereas that one's all in one, and the other magnetics are probably on the dock. Is that true? Nope, doesn't look like it for the Ethernet on the dock. So magnetics are probably must be on here. Maybe it shares. Is that possible? Not sure about that. Oh, so the one from yesterday, the connectors were next to each other. It doesn't have a microphone on here. It's otherwise a fairly similar assembly. And it looks like the USB part would be pin compatible with the power in the center and the data on the edges. But the audio bit's probably different because of the microphone. Interesting. I want to look up what the chip is on this little board. Yeah, it is. So this little thingy here that was plugged on is a trusted platform module from Infineon. So there's some information about it there. They didn't give very much, but there's a picture of the chip and there's a block diagram of what's going on inside there. I/O LPC bus, ROM, RAM, key generator thingies. Goes between the Southbridge and the Super I/O on the low pin count bus. Very good. TPM. Need to upgrade that if you want to run Windows 11. It's got to be TPM 2.0 supposedly. I assume this one would be 1.1 since it says 1.1 on the part number there. Would be my assumption. Okay, do we need to look at anything else on this computer? I don't know if we need to take apart the display. Kind of already did that on the other computer. I think it's going to be much different, is it? Same sort of deal with difficult to get off screws. Yeah, let's pass on that. Anyway, there you go. Some questions answered, and a look inside another computer. Oh, two more computers. Apple computer and different model HP. Now, stay tuned for the next one. We'll take apart this, which I got at hard off for 1,000 yen. I think 1,080 when tax was included. So it's a Japanese netbook for Windows 7, which has a USB-B connector, a mini B on it, which is quite bizarre. Anyway, we'll do that next time.